The Old Benchers of the Inner Temple by Charles Lamb. I was born and passed the first 7 years of my life in the temple. Its church, its halls, its gardens, its fountain, its river. I had almost said, for in those young years, what was this king of rivers to me but a stream that watered our pleasant places? These are of my oldest recollections. I repeat to this day no verses to myself more frequently, or with kindlier emotion, than those of Spenser, where he speaks of this spot. There when they came were as those bricky towers, the which on Thames Broad aged back doth ride, where now the studious lawyers have their bowers, their whilom want the Templar knights to bide, till they decayed through pride. Indeed, it is the most elegant spot in the metropolis. What a transition for a countryman visiting London for the first time, the passing from the crowded Strand or Fleet Street, by unexpected avenues, into its magnificent ample squares, its classic green recesses. What a cheerful, liberal look hath that portion of it which from 3 sides overlooks the greater garden, that goodly pile of building strong, albeit of paper height, confronting with massy contrast the lighter, older, more fantastically shrouded one, named of Harcourt, with the cheerful Crown Office Row, place of my kindly engenger, right opposite the stately stream, which washes the garden foot with her yet scarcely trade-polluted waters, and seems but just weaned from her Twickenham naiads. A man would give something to have been born in such places. What a collegiate aspect has that fine Elizabethan hall, where the fountain plays, which I have made to rise and fall how many times? To the astoundment of the young urchins, my contemporaries, who, not being able to guess at its recondite machinery, were almost tempted to hail the wondrous work as magic. What an antique air had the now almost effaced sundials, with their moral inscriptions, seeming coevals with that time which they measured, and to take their revelations of its flight immediately from heaven, holding correspondence with the fountain of light. How would the dark line steal imperceptibly on, watched by the eye of childhood, eager to detect its movement, never catched nice as an evanescent cloud, or the first arrests of sleep. Ah, yet doth beauty like a dial hand steal from his figure, and no pace perceived. What a dead thing is a clock, with its ponderous embowelments of lead and brass, its pert or solemn dullness of communication, compared with the simple altar-like structure and silent heart language of the old dial. It stood as the garden god of Christian gardens. Why is it almost everywhere vanished? If its business use be superseded by more elaborate inventions, its moral uses, its beauty might have pleaded for its continuance. It spoke of moderate labours, of pleasures not protracted after sunset, of temperance and good hours. It was the primitive clock, the horologe of the first world. Adam could scarce have missed it in paradise. It was the measure appropriate for sweet plants and flowers to spring by, for the birds to apportion their silver warblings by, for flocks to pasture and be led to fold by. The shepherd carved it out quaintly in the sun, and, turning philosopher by the very occupation, provided it with mottos more touching than tombstones. It was a pretty device of the gardener, recorded by Marvell, who, in the days of artificial gardening, made a dial out of herbs and flowers. I must quote his verses a little higher up, for they are full, as all his serious poetry was, of a witty delicacy. They will not come in awkwardly, I hope, in a talk of fountains and sundials. He is speaking of sweet garden scenes. What wondrous life in this I lead! Ripe apples drop about my head, the luscious clusters of the vine upon my mouth do crush their wine, the nectarine and curious peach into my hands themselves do reach. Stumbling on melons as I pass, ensnared with flowers, I fall on grass. Meanwhile the mind from pleasure less withdraws into its happiness. The mind, that ocean, where each kind does straight its own resemblance find, yet it creates, transcending these, far other worlds and other seas, annihilating all that's made to a green thought in a green shade. Here at the fountain's sliding foot, or at some fruit tree's mossy root, casting the body's vest aside, my soul into the boughs does glide. There, like a bird, it sits and sings, then wets and claps its silver wings, and, till prepared for longer flight, waves in its plumes the various light. How well the skilful gardener drew, of flowers and herbs this dial knew, where from above the milder sun does through a fragrant zodiac run, and as it works the industrious bee computes its time as well as we. How could such sweet and wholesome hours be reckoned but with herbs and flowers? 1. The artificial fountains of the metropolis are, in like manner, fast vanishing. Most of them are dried up or bricked over, yet where one is left, as in that little green nook behind the Southsea house, what a freshness it gives to the dreary pile. 4 little winged marble boys used to play their virgin fancies, spouting out ever fresh streams from their innocent wanton lips in the square of Lincoln's Inn, when I was no bigger than they were figured. They are gone, and the spring choked up. The fashion, they tell me, is gone by, and these things are esteemed childish. Why not then gratify children by letting them stand? Lawyers, I suppose, were children once. They are awakening images to them at least. Why must everything smack of man and mannish? Is the world all grown up? Is childhood dead? Or is there not in the bosoms of the wisest and the best some of the child's heart left to respond to its earliest enchantments? The figures were grotesque. Are the stiff-wigged living figures that still flitter and chatter about that area less Gothic in appearance? Or is the splutter of their hot rhetoric one half so refreshing and innocent as the little cool playful streams those exploded cherubs uttered? They have lately Gothicized the entrance to the inner temple hall, and the library front to assimilate them, I suppose, to the body of the hall, which they do not at all resemble. What is become of the winged horse that stood over the former, a stately arms, and who has removed those frescoes of the virtues which Italianized the end of the paper buildings? My first hint of allegory, they must account to me for these things which I miss so greatly. The terrace is indeed left which we used to call the parade, but the traces are passed away of the footsteps which made its pavement awful. It is become common and profane. The old benchers had it almost sacred to themselves in the forepart of the day at least. They might not be sided or jostled. Their air and dress asserted the parade. You left wide spaces betwixt you when you passed them. We walk on even terms with their successors. The roguish eye of J.L.L., ever ready to be delivered of a jest, almost invites a stranger to vie a repartee with it. But what insolent familiar durst have mated Thomas Coventry, whose person was a quadrate, his step massy and elephantine, his face square as the lion's, his gait peremptory and path-keeping, indivertible from his way as a moving column, the scarecrow of his inferiors, the browbeater of equals and superiors, who made a solitude of children wherever he came, for they fled his insufferable presence, as they would have shunned an Elisha bear. His growl was as thunder in their ears, whether he spake to them in mirth or in rebuke, his invitatory notes being indeed of all the most repulsive and horrid. Clouds of snuff, aggravating the natural terrors of his speech, broke from each majestic nostril, darkening the air. He took it not by pinches but a palmful at once, diving for it under the mighty flaps of his old-fashioned waistcoat pocket. His waistcoat red and angry, his coat dark rappee, tinctured by dye original and by adjuncts with buttons of obsolete gold. And so he paced the terrace. By his side a milder form was sometimes to be seen, the pensive gentility of Samuel Salt. They were coevals and had nothing but that and their benchership in common. In politics Salt was a Whig and Coventry a staunch Tory. Many a sarcastic growl did the latter cast out, for Coventry had a rough spinous humour at the political confederates of his associate, which rebounded from the gentle bosom of the latter like cannonballs from wool. You could not ruffle Samuel Salt. Had the reputation of being a very clever man, and of excellent discernment in the chamber practice of the law. I suspect his knowledge did not amount to much. When a case of difficult disposition of money, testamentary or otherwise, came before him, he ordinarily handed it over with a few instructions to his man Lovell, who was a quick little fellow, and would dispatch it out of hand by the light of natural understanding, of which he had an uncommon share. It was incredible what repute for talents enjoyed by the mere trick of gravity. He was a shy man, a child might pose him in a minute, indolent and procrastinating to the last degree, yet men would give him credit for vast application in spite of himself. He was not to be trusted with himself with impunity. He never dressed for a dinner party but he forgot his sword. They wore swords then, or some other necessary part of his equipage. Lovell had his eye upon him on all these occasions, and ordinarily gave him his cue. If there was anything which he could speak unseasonably, he was sure to do it. He was to dine at a relative's of the unfortunate Miss Blandy on the day of her execution, and L., who had a wary foresight of his probable hallucinations, before he set out, schooled him with great anxiety not in any possible manner to allude to her story that day. Promised faithfully to observe the injunction. He had not been seated in the parlour, where the company was expecting the dinner summons, 4 minutes, when a pause in the conversation ensuing he got up, looked out of window and pulling down his ruffles, an ordinary motion with him, observed it was a gloomy day, and added, Miss Blandy must be hanged by this time, I suppose. Instances of this sort were perpetual, yet was thought by some of the greatest men of his time a fit person to be consulted, not alone in matters pertaining to the law, but in the ordinary niceties and embarrassments of conduct, from force of manner entirely. He never laughed. He had the same good fortune among the female world, was a known toast with the ladies, and 1 or 2 are said to have died for love of him, I suppose because he never trifled or talked gallantry with them, or paid them, indeed, hardly common attentions. He had a fine face and person but wanted, methought, the spirit that should have shown them off with advantage to the women. His eye lacked lustre, not so thought Susan P., who at the advanced age of 60 was seen in the cold evening time unaccompanied, wetting the pavement of B.D. Row with tears that fell in drops which might be heard, because her friend had died that day, he whom she had pursued with a hopeless passion for the last 40 years, a passion which years could not extinguish or abate, nor the long resolved yet gently enforced puttings off of unrelenting bachelorhood dissuade from its cherished purpose. Mild Susan P., thou hast now thy friend in heaven. Thomas Coventry was a cadet of the noble family of that name. He passed his youth in contracted circumstances, which gave him early those parsimonious habits which in afterlife never forsook him, so that with one windfall or another, about the time I knew him he was master of 400,000 or 500,000 pounds, nor did he look or walk worth a moidor less. He lived in a gloomy house opposite the pump in Sir Jeant's Inn, Fleet Street. The counsel is doing self-imposed penance in it, for what reason I divine not at this day. C had an agreeable seat at North Cray, where he seldom spent above a day or two at a time in the summer, but preferred during the hot months standing at his window in this damp, close, well-like mansion to watch, as he said, the maids drawing water all day long. I suspect he had his within-door reasons for the preference. Hic curus et arma fura, he might think his treasures more safe. His house had the aspect of a strong box. C was a close hunks, a hoarder rather than a miser, or if a miser, none of the mad Elwes breed who have brought discredit upon a character, which cannot exist without certain admirable points of steadiness and unity of purpose. One may hate a true miser, but cannot, I suspect, so easily despise him. By taking care of the pence, he is often enabled to part with the pounds, upon a scale that leaves us careless, generous fellows halting at an immeasurable distance behind. C gave away 30,000 L, at once in his lifetime to a blind charity. His housekeeping was severely looked after, but he kept the table of a gentleman. He would know who came in and who went out of his house, but his kitchen chimney was never suffered to freeze. Salt was his opposite in this as in all, never knew what he was worth in the world, and having but a competency for his rank which his indolent habits were little calculated to improve, might have suffered severely if he had not had honest people about him. Lovell took care of everything. He was at once his clerk, his good servant, his dresser, his friend, his flapper, his guide, stopwatch, auditor, treasurer. He did nothing without consulting Lovell, or failed in anything without expecting and fearing his admonishing. He put himself almost too much in his hands, had they not been the purest in the world. He resigned his title almost to respect as a master, if L could ever have forgotten for a moment that he was a servant. I knew this Lovell. He was a man of an incorrigible and losing honesty. A good fellow withal, and would strike. In the cause of the oppressed, he never considered inequalities, or calculated the number of his opponents. He once wrested a sword out of the hand of a man of quality that had drawn upon him, and pommelled him severely with the hilt of it. The swordsman had offered insult to a female, an occasion upon which no odds against him could have prevented the interference of Lovell. He would stand next day bareheaded to the same person, modestly to excuse his interference, for L never forgot rank where something better was not concerned. L was the liveliest little fellow breathing, had a face as gay as Garrick's, whom he was said greatly to resemble. I have a portrait of him which confirms it. Possessed a fine turn for humorous poetry, next to Swift and Prior, moulded heads in clay or plaster of Paris to admiration, by the dint of natural genius merely, turned cribbage boards and such small cabinet toys to perfection, took a hand at quadrille or bowls with equal facility, made punch better than any man of his degree in England, had the merriest quips and conceits, and was altogether as brimful of rogueries and inventions as you could desire. He was a brother of the angle, moreover, and just such a free, hearty, honest companion as Mr. Isaac Walton would have chosen to go a-fishing with. I saw him in his old age and the decay of his faculties, palsy-smitten, in the last sad stage of human weakness, a remnant most forlorn of what he was, yet even then his eye would light up upon the mention of his favourite Garrick. He was greatest, he would say in bays, was upon the stage nearly throughout the whole performance, and as busy as a bee. At intervals, too, he would speak of his former life, and how he came up a little boy from Lincoln to go to service, and how his mother cried at parting with him, and how he returned after some few years' absence in his smart new livery to see her, and she blessed herself at the change and could hardly be brought to believe that it was her own bairn. And then, the excitement subsiding, he would weep, till I have wished that sad second childhood might have a mother still to lay its head upon her lap. But the common mother of us all in no long time after received him gently into hers. With Coventry and with Salt in their walks upon the terrace, most commonly Peter Pearson would join, to make up a third. They did not walk linked arm in arm in those days, as now our stout triumvirs sweep the streets, but generally with both hands folded behind them for state, or with one at least behind, the other carrying a cane. P was a benevolent but not a prepossessing man. He had that in his face which you could not term unhappiness, it rather implied an incapacity of being happy. His cheeks were colourless even to whiteness. His look was uninviting, resembling, but without his sourness, that of our great philanthropist. I know that he did good acts, but I could never make out what he was. Contemporary with these, but subordinate, was Daines Barrington, another oddity. He walked burly and square, in imitation, I think, of Coventry. Howbeit he attained not to the dignity of his prototype. Nevertheless, he did pretty well upon the strength of being a tolerable antiquarian, and having a brother a bishop. When the account of his year's treasurership came to be audited, the following singular charge was unanimously disallowed by the bench. Item, disbursed Mr. Allen, the gardener, 20 shillings, for stuff to poison the sparrows, by my orders. Next to him was old Barton, a jolly negation, who took upon him the ordering of the bills of fare for the Parliament chamber, where the benchers dine, answering to the combination rooms at college, much to the easement of his less epicurean brethren. I know nothing more of him. Then Reed and Twopenny, Reed good-humoured and personable, Twopenny good-humoured but thin and felicitous in jests upon his own figure. If T was thin, Warry was attenuated and fleeting. Many must remember him, for he was rather of later date, and his singular gait, which was performed by 3 steps and a jump regularly succeeding. The steps were little efforts like that of a child beginning to walk, the jump comparatively vigorous as a foot to an inch. Where he learned this figure, or what occasioned it, I could never discover. It was neither graceful in itself, nor seemed to answer the purpose any better than common walking. The extreme tenuity of his frame, I suspect, set him upon it. It was a trial of poising. Twopenny would often rally him upon his leanness and hail him as Brother Lusty, but W had no relish of a joke. His features were spiteful. I have heard that he would pinch his cat's ears extremely when anything had offended him. Jackson, the omniscient Jackson he was called, was of this period. He had the reputation of possessing more multifarious knowledge than any man of his time. He was the Friar Bacon of the less literate portion of the temple. I remember a pleasant passage of the cook applying to him, with much formality of apology, for instructions how to write down edge bone of beef in his Bill of Commons. He was supposed to know, if any man in the world did. He decided the orthography to be, as I have given it, fortifying his authority with such anatomical reasons as dismissed the manciple, for the time learned and happy. Some do spell it yet perversely H-bone from a fanciful resemblance between its shape and that of the aspirate so denominated. I had almost forgotten Mingay with the iron hand, but he was somewhat later. He had lost his right hand by some accident, and supplied it with a grappling hook, which he wielded with a tolerable adroitness. I detected the substitute, before I was old enough to reason whether it were artificial or not. I remember the astonishment it raised in me. He was a blustering, loud-talking person, and I reconciled the phenomenon to my ideas as an emblem of power, somewhat like the horns in the forehead of Michelangelo's Moses. Baron Mazers, who walks, or did till very lately, in the costume of the reign of George II, closes my imperfect recollections of the old benchers of the inner temple. Fantastic forms, whither are ye fled? Or if the like of you exist, why exist they no more for me? Ye inexplicable, half-understood appearances, why comes in reason to tear away the preternatural mist, bright or gloomy, that enshrouded you? Why make ye so sorry a figure in my relation, who made up to me, to my childish eyes, the mythology of the temple? In those days I saw gods as old men covered with a mantle, walking upon the earth. Let the dreams of classic idolatry perish. Extinct be the fairies and fairy trumpery of legendary fabling. In the heart of childhood there will, forever, spring up a well of innocent or wholesome superstition. The seeds of exaggeration will be busy there, and vital, from everyday forms educing the unknown and the uncommon. In that little Goshen there will be light, when the grown world flounders about in the darkness of sense and materiality. While childhood, and while dreams reducing childhood shall be left, imagination shall not have spread her holy wings totally to fly the earth. P.S. I have done injustice to the soft shade of Samuel Salt. See what it is to trust to imperfect memory and the erring notices of childhood. Yet I protest I always thought that he had been a bachelor. This gentleman, R.N. informs me, married young, and losing his lady in childbed within the first year of their union, fell into a deep melancholy, from the effects of which probably he never thoroughly recovered. In what a new light does this place his rejection, oh call it by a gentler name, of mild Susan P., unravelling into beauty certain peculiarities of this very shy and retiring character. Henceforth let no one receive the narratives of Elia for true records. They are in truth but shadows of fact verisimilitudes, not verities, or sitting, but upon the remote edges and outskirts of history. He is no such honest chronicler as R.N., and would have done better perhaps to have consulted that gentleman before he sent these incondite reminiscences to press. But the worthy sub-treasurer, who respects his old and his new masters, would but have been puzzled at the indecorous liberties of Elia. The good man wots not, peradventure, of the license which magazines have arrived at in this plain-speaking age, or hardly dreams of their existence beyond the gentleman's. His furthest monthly excursions in this nature having been long confined to the holy ground of honest Urban's obituary. May it be long before his own name shall help to swell those columns of unenvied flattery. Meantime, O ye new benchers of the inner temple, cherish him kindly, for he is himself the kindliest of human creatures. Should infirmities overtake him, he is yet in green and vigorous senility. Make allowances for them, remembering that ye yourselves are old. So may the winged horse, your ancient badge and cognizance, still flourish. So may future hookers and seldens illustrate your church and chambers. So may the sparrows, in default of more melodious quiristers, unpoisoned hop about your walks. So may the fresh-coloured and cleanly nursery maid, who by leave airs her playful charge in your stately gardens, drop her prettiest blushing curtsy as ye pass, reductive of juvenescent emotion. So may the younkers of this generation eye you, pacing your stately terrace with the same superstitious veneration with which the child Elia gazed on the old worthies that solemnized the parade before ye.